I would like to recognize the missing voices in our CAMCA conference this year, which is our Tajik fellows and our Armenian friends. And I think this is a note to our Mongolian colleagues who will be, try to organize the conference next year, that we will try to have everybody in the room to make our conversations much richer, because we do need everyone in the room to have a valid discussion. And I would really want our panelists to stay within 2 minutes, so we can have like a nice 2 to 3 rounds, and we'll try to wrap this up in 45 minutes if we can, as we are starting a little bit later. I want to start off by asking Azim on what the new media trends in Kyrgyzstan is with the new legislative changes. What are the new consumer behaviors? Do you see this as an opportunity? Please start off by introducing yourself to our guests.
Thank you so much, dear friends. I'm glad to be here speaking about media. I've been in this profession for more than 15 years. It's weird to say it at this point. I do film production, I do communication consultancy, and I've been in charge of Media Kitchen communications agency for more than 10 years now. And so when we speak about media trends in Kyrgyzstan, I think we have to acknowledge several waves of those trends. Some of the trends are local, and we can talk about specific legislative changes or persecution of journalists, and it's a sad time to be a Kyrgyz journalist, to be honest. A lot of journalists, activists, and bloggers are now being jailed. Some of them, the persecution is asking up to 20 years of prison sentence. And so there are a lot of trends that are going on locally, and they may be connected to local political practices, right? But also I think we're not standing apart from the world. All the global trends that are active in the world right now are also kind of touching upon Kyrgyzstan's media landscape. And one of the largest changes that we see is how media landscape is being kind of Uberized, is being defragmented. There's been a recent study on trust of American citizens towards institutions, and it's like historically low. And when we talk about institutions, we're not only talking about government institutions, but we're also talking about media institutions. And so I think similarly in Kyrgyzstan, there have never been such a point where a blogger or an influencer would have a larger audience than the most respected news channel or news agency. And so that's one of the trends, and we can see the Reuters study that shows that post-pandemic there's been this huge shift towards people getting their news only on social media, getting news from their friends, and so the word media influencer has never been as relevant, right? So I think that's one of the things. So even in the title of this session, we use the word voice, right? And I think it's so appropriate and so on point, because when we said voice, we used to mean either a media outlet or a person being kind of amplified through media outlet. Right now, every person is a medium, and so every person has a capacity to form their audiences, reach out to their audiences, and that's also one of the trends we're observing in Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you. And I think it's on point, because I was trying to make sense of what's happening in France over the last 36 hours. And I was just following a guy's Twitter thread, which is being retweeted probably 3,000 times, who's explaining it in 10 X's or tweets on what's happening over there. And I think it's a growing trend that we want to hear from regional voices. People want to hear authentic voices, and storytelling is how we communicate, and it's a superpower. So, Kat, you've been working in this region for a while, and you wanted to talk more about how you amplify regional voices. Do you see, new stories emerging that the Western audiences are more responding to? I see that there's economic interest from David Cameron's visit to Central Asia and Mongolia. There's definitely interest for critical minerals and new frontier opportunities again. And these kind of mining cycles and commodity interests come and go. But when you've been reporting on the region, is there a theme that really captures the rest of the world's attention, as your audience is quite global, right?
Yeah, so I'm Catherine Putz. I'm the managing editor of a publication called The Diplomat. We cover Asia, so the Caspian, sorry to my Caucasus friends, but the Caspian Sea to the Pacific. And my journalism is focused on Central Asia for a long time, and a lot of my work has been with Central Asian journalists and Central Asian academics and scholars, and really bringing their perspectives into that global conversation. The Diplomat itself, while we publish in English, is really a global publication. My publisher is an Australian based in Tokyo for more than 30 years. We have an Australian editor, we have an editor in India, there's 2 of us in the US. In the past we've had a Malaysian editor. So the Diplomat's real sort of core ethos is a focus on bringing Asian voices, Asian broadly voices into these conversations that are happening in English in the West, and sort of bridging that gap. There are certain sort of interests in the West that are not always so salient locally. You start talking about like critical minerals or semiconductors. It sometimes doesn't translate down into the local level, but I think the thing I really wanted to highlight in this time is that work that I've done in publishing Central Asian authors and some of the difficulties that entails. And I've been at the Diplomat for, it'll be 10 years in September. And so over that decade of my work, I have seen a trend, and my Kyrgyz colleague here mentioned it, of just sort of increasing pressure on journalists. And so there's a real desire to self-censor, and it's one I can't argue with, because I think that everybody has to be concerned about their safety and their security, which is why I end up writing a lot of the more sensitive stories, because I don't live here, my family is not here. But over that decade, I have had fewer Central Asian journalists who feel comfortable writing in their own names about sensitive topics, and I use air quotes for that because they're not really sensitive topics, but they're sort of judged as being somewhere past a red line. And I think that really diminishes our understanding of Central Asian perspectives on these issues. Just because we don't talk about them doesn't mean they don't exist. And people are talking about them. They talk about them in their Instagram, they talk about them on TikTok. People do discuss difficult issues, whether they're economic or political or gender politics. There's a lot of issues that are sort of considered sensitive. People do have those conversations, but we don't get to see them. And so I urge everyone in this room to really sort of keep that in mind, that just because you're not seeing it in media doesn't mean your sort of feelings about it aren't valid. And you certainly have people who are talking about those issues.
Thank you. And I think local coverage of high-profile issues or national catastrophes or international issues really have ripple effect throughout the world. Yeah, we were just talking about the Georgia case when we were Rumsfeld Fellows last fall in DC, and just now with the foreign agent law in Georgia. Mongolians were paying attention, and it's far away, but we are also paying attention because we don't want that to happen elsewhere or replicated elsewhere. And I understand Kyrgyz just adopted, but trying to really stay on the positive side of here. And I would like our audience to ask us questions on the next round. I'll probably just ask one question each from our panelists and really open it up to the room, because I think that will make our discussion more lively. And from Mariam, we were talking about how you guys cover conflicts, and are you seeing any media trends with the new media that's coming in? We have AI now who can respond to consumer questions and who can tailor your news feeds on a Substack or email it to you, whatever you want, right? Is your audience changing? Are you still following the old media, the philosophy behind your newsroom, because you're operating in a regional newsroom? Yeah.
Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Mariam Nikuradze. I am a co-founder of OC Media, which it's short for Open Caucasus Media. We cover North and South Caucasus. We publish in English. And I've been a journalist for 15 years. You asked me to be positive. It's very hard to stay positive. But I'll start with your question about covering of the war, because you were talking about giving voices to different people. And what we've done when we were covering the Karabakh war, we were trying to give the voice to people who were against war, which was very hard. But it was very important because it pushed a lot of interesting discussions, even though it really put some people behind this text in danger. But I want to respond to what a colleague from Kyrgyzstan was saying about the trend. My observation is, yes, sure, of course, people are on social media. Their consumption of news changed a lot. But at the same time, every time, I mean, I'm speaking about the Caucasus, I don't know how it's anywhere else, but every time there is a big crisis like pandemic or war or elections, people tend to go to good reputational media outlets. I mean, we see these spikes in our media outlets, for example. It means that, okay, maybe people see it in their social media, but they want to read more. They go beyond the headlines. So it means that we are still important. People still have kind of faith in media, and yeah, I think we can continue doing what we do, and we were having this discussion with Scott before that both of our outlets, we don't do breaking news. We stopped doing that because there are citizen journalists who do this breaking news. They can do one sentence news that this guy said this or somebody was attacked. But what we do, we try to put everything in context, and this is what the readers really appreciate in our region, for example, and in your area of coverage as well. And finally, you asked about AI. I was joking that in Caucasus, things usually come a bit like around 5 years later when it comes to media new tools. We started using AI tools, but we are like using the very basic ones. For example, us at OC Media, we just started using text to audio thing. I mean, our readers can just listen to our articles. It's quite amazing the way it's done and can be done. But that's it. We are actually very frowning upon people using AI-generated news. We think that it's not accurate. It's not there yet. But there are certain ways that AI can make our jobs easier, and we are starting to use it for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think we have a Mongolian company who's represented in this forum, who's working on a large language model for Mongolian language, which will be useful in all sorts of contexts. And I think it's important to keep developing your language, to keep the academic language. I think when I was attending a workshop in Almaty where Kazakh colleagues were saying, our academic language is Russian, and we want to develop Kazakh language into our academic language. And I think it's very important for you as a sovereign country to continue to push towards your language development as well. So my question to Jonathan is, I understand you guys are also playing around with AI, how does your work amplify regional voices? So, what thought process goes through your editors and journalists when you cover the region, when you discuss on which topics to focus on?
So, hello everyone, I'm Jonathan, I'm an editor with the Times of Central Asia. We were actually born in Bishkek 25 years ago, went dormant for a while, but we've since been kind of taken over by a new team. We publish news from all 5 Central Asian republics in all 5 languages plus English. We use AI in 2 ways at the moment. The first of which is we're launching a podcast, a weekly podcast that will be text-to-speech, so a leading article that we publish during the week. At the end of the week, we will then turn into an AI-generated podcast, because we understand that nowadays people don't just consume their news in text format. They might want to listen to it instead at a time that's convenient for them. The second way we use AI is in translating our articles, because for many of we have local kind of writers on the ground in all 5 countries. Not all of them have English as a working language. So many times they will write articles in their own working language, which is then translated by AI into the other 5 languages and then into English. And it's then my job to convert that sort of AI English into acceptable professional English, with that kind of I've lost the phrase now, but the kind of the human aspect of making an article ready. I mean, one more trend that I've observed is just simply added interest in the region. We've seen we mentioned David Cameron's visit very recently, formats such as the C5+1, CAMCA itself, all of these initiatives are growing in momentum. And there simply is more interest from the West, from the States, Europe, elsewhere, which I think is a reason why that about 6 months ago, the Times of Central Asia was taken over by a new team, because it was appreciated there was increased interest in the region.
Great. And for Farrukh, you're more going into different sectors, working on different researches. Are you seeing any trends that will define the next few years, especially after the war? Is Russia still controlling the narrative out of this region, or do you seeing more new players emerging? And is there any projects that you're working on or studies that you can share with us?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farrukh Irnazarov. I'm a co-founder at Central Asian Development Institute, but more importantly, I'm CAMCA member. So a few things. Trends are very important, yes, and I will look at trends from local media perspective. So we see huge commercialization of media. Not that much huge increase in journalism quality. So in that sense, we see that more and more bloggers actually amplifying that voice, but at the same time, they are actually getting this slightly different. So you asked us to be a bit optimistic, so they are being creative because they realize that they have to avoid some acute issues, some sensitive issues. So that's why, they trying to play with their language. You have to always read between the lines. It's there because they know if they go all-out attack, most probably they'll face issues. So that's why, in that sense, they're being creative. Okay. So it's very similar like entrepreneurs in Central Asia. They have to be creative because legislation keeps changing like every minute, and then basically, if you don't adapt, you are out of the game. So it's a quite similar phenomenon. But then we have an issue, and this is something that we cannot ignore, is the issue of disinformation. So the more outrageous piece of news you create, the better outreach you have, because people start sharing. They are not in the position to actually to check the source, to do fact checking, and they don't even we conducted research. We talked to more than 300 people across Central Asia, and we asked them, so if you realize that basically this was fake news that you received, what do you do with that outlet? At least, are you cautious about this outlet? I'm not saying blacklisting it. And the answer was actually no. So the point is, they realize that sometimes they create them on purpose and then they share it widely. And disinformation also has different type of faces because, for example, any news related to United States will get so many thumbs down immediately as a reaction. So it can be absolutely innocent piece of news saying that, for example, US government decided to give wheelchairs to people with disabilities, right? And then immediately you will see, because people consume lots of Russian propaganda, they believe there is something behind that, and they will, believe me, they will find numerous ways to connect the dots, even if the dots are not there. And this is another trend that we cannot overlook. But the more important thing, there is no regional outlet. So a regional outlet that emanates from the region, not from outside. So in that sense, we are facing the dilemma, and I would like to finish on this note. So on the one hand, we see that more and more recommendations from international organizations, from experts, saying we have to create more outlets in local languages. Okay. But it doesn't bring us to any regional perspective. So while Russian is there, then basically we have an issue that Russian-dominated agenda comes into play. So the most important thing is how to reconcile that. And I would leave that with this kind of open point, and we can discuss this further. Thank you.
It's a very good point, and I think the Internews study that they did last year also confirmed that when people are not sure about the news source or the credibility of the report, they are relying on Russian language media or bigger media outlets to confirm, because if information is something you care about, you kind of dig deep into it. A good example of a tragedy that's bringing people together or shedding light on an important issue was, I think, the murder of that young lady in Kazakhstan. I think it shook the region, and I think it captured the global attention. And I spent 2 weeks on disinformation workshop in Almaty. So Kazakh civil society and journalists were sharing that even in Mongolia, Mongolian women's NGOs were talking about the similar cases in Mongolia, what the legislation in Kazakh for domestic violence. So I think these sensationalist coverages of these issues or real-time coverage of trial sheds light on issues and then brings people together, because then the civil society starts talking to each other. What can we do? How do we help you, overcome these issues that you're facing as a society? So on that remark, I would like to open it up for our audiences to ask questions or share us an important insight on regional voices that you see as an opportunity or a new trend that you're seeing. If there's any questions. I'm looking at my friends here, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My question is, I think everyone sees the tendency of countries opening up, a lot of reforms taking place, but at the same time, we see the fact that a lot of media and journalists are being shut down, basically. And what do you think the tendency will be in the next coming years? In terms of the developments that are taking place, and particularly probably in Central Asia?
Thank you for that question. I think these two things are not unrelated, but one of the things that happens when you sort of shut down particularly investigative journalism is there's not a lot of oversight of some of these very lucrative deals and contracts and things that are happening. Opening up is good and increasing business is good, but that's also just a playground for corruption. And certain people get rich off of that. And so they have interests in sort of shutting down critical coverage. And I think that's why we see these two things happening at the same time. Where that goes from here is going to depend on sort of the resilience of regional media. And I can tell you that I work with a lot of Central Asian journalists, and while there's a lot of concerns, there's still a lot of heart and fight in the game. And so I think people will continue to try to press on these issues. And the question sort of for society is how they respond to that. How do you process this information and what do you do with it? And that's something that regional governments are going to have to deal with and regional populations are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, thank you. I think, unfortunately, the local outlets are not that sustainable. So we saw a trend where someone comes in with some strong message, good analytics, and after some time, they just vanish. So be it for political reasons or financial reasons. And financial reasons, I think they're much more important. The region itself lacks in-depth analytics. It's more like describing something rather than giving proper analysis and connecting the dots and explaining actually what are the underlying causes for this event or implications for the region. So that's why it's quite interesting phenomenon that we saw that in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, people are more interested in political news compared to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. So in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, they are mostly interested in consuming sports and any type of entertainment type of things. And that actually also a nice snapshot what's going on in those countries. And the trend, actually, it's not follow the investigation, follow the analytics, it's more like follow the money. So, and coupled with the lack of investigative journalism in the region, so we barely have good programs that actually focus on investigative journalism. So in that sense, we saw there was a huge interest from local public to see Navalny's investigative journalism attempts, and this was something inspiring, but so scary, so that like we'd better not enter those grounds. So in that sense, for them, it's really difficult for those outlets, first of all, to get all the subscribers, but second, to be sustainable and to be consistent with their messaging. Because whenever you approach and try to actually promote a piece of news within that outlet, there are two options. One, you can pay and they will say like, на правах рекламы, basically based on ad or like promotion, so you clearly see that this was paid for. And another one, you pay more and you just, get rid of that. So basically, and then you slowly take someone by the hand and drive to a certain conclusion. So this kind of trend we do observe. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe elaborate on certain things that Farrukh has said. I think we need to have a kind of a larger picture of how media, not only media landscapes, but media as a business has evolved over the last years. I'm a journalism, I have journalism major myself, but when we, as students studied, what journalism was about, it was always about, informing in the first place. I think right now we're so kind of, bombarded with information like on a daily basis. Like the first thing a lot of us do in the morning is we pick up our phones and, we scroll through, this different feeds, whether it's, emails or Twitter or TikTok or whatever, right? And so most of the times we don't look for certain information. We expect information to find us, right? And when information does not find us, it means maybe it was not that valuable. A lot of professional effort might have been put into this, producing this piece of information. Even, investigative journalism, right? Even when our journalists or, Navalny's team, they do it, they always try to find, an angle to make it entertaining. Like, for instance, even our, Kyrgyz investigative journalists, they not only show you the kind of corruption, but they show you this ludicrous, luxe interiors of the houses, right? This golden chandeliers and whatever, because it grabs attention. And I think that's the main point, that media business has shifted from informing to grabbing attention in the first place. And it has impacted the way we consume information so much. Over this table, we spoke a lot about reading news, right? And I think reading as means of receiving information has been declining, like rapidly over the years, and that's why people, like overall, like the audience, don't want to spend much effort into analyzing the information. They want to have bite-sized pieces of information delivered to you, whether it's through social media or through TikTok or Telegram channels and whatnot. And also, those of you who have younger kids, that they do not read, books, they read screens, right? And that also shapes the way we consume information from punctuation, grammar, like orthography standpoint. So in that sense, writing a beautiful piece, like, being eloquent in how you do it, has become, not relevant as it used to be. So it's about producing a type of information, that grabs your attention, keeps your attention, and it's all about metrics, right? So, like, whoever of you, who studies your content, and how it performs, the analytics, you'll see that it grabs like 15 seconds of, viewers' attention, and then it drops like drastically, right? And so in that sense, with certain pain in my heart, I have to say that investigative journalism is really important. But I think people are so much like over-occupied with information that they're not going to miss it as much as we wish they would. Because, they would go on their screens and, there's going to be a lot of entertaining information that will eventually find them. And that's a sad truth in my opinion.
I will talk about the Caucasus. I know you asked about Central Asia, but still. Fortunately, unfortunately, things in fragile democracies change very fast. And when we were co-founding OC Media in 2017, we thought that Georgia was the safest place to be based in. But in a matter of a few years, we had 51 journalists beaten up in one day and nobody got punished. This was when we lost the sense of security. Then, actually in 2021, OC Media was listed as an undesirable organization by Russia, and we were joking, it's so amazing that we are based in Georgia, this would never happen to us. And then, 2 years later, our government introduced a foreign agent draft law. We thought things could never get even worse in Azerbaijan, for example, in terms of media freedom. But at the end of last year, we've seen our friends and colleagues from Abzas Media, one of the last media outlets, which still had journalists on the ground. They arrested most of the journalists there. A situation in Armenia is relatively better in terms of media freedom right now. It was Georgia before the leader in these terms, but not anymore. But at the same time, I feel like things are fragile there and it could change very, very easily. And when you ask what could be in 5 years or even 1 year, it's very hard to predict, especially when it comes to Georgia, because a lot, for example, for us depends what will happen in the parliamentary election. And I'm 33 years old. I've never ever considered living somewhere else outside Georgia, but now I'm faced with the reality that we are looking into registering somewhere else outside Georgia and having a backup plan that if the government stays, eventually maybe we'll have to go in exile, which is insane to think about. Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, it's really exciting to see you journalists sitting there in a row. I haven't met all of you, but it's really, I think everyone in the room reads you and is grateful for what you do. It's wonderful. Now, two things. How to evaluate, I'm not a journalist, so excuse me, but how do you evaluate journalism? And in the case of this region, it would seem to me in countries that have adopted totally new legal systems and political systems and so on within our lifetime, and where second phase or generation of changes are happening or not happening, or reversions or whatever, that at such a time, it's important to acknowledge the need in the society for the citizen to be informed. Now, let's not be naive about the impediments to that today, and you've enumerated only a few of them. But it seems to me that embracing the idea of informing citizens has to be at the foundation of what you do. And I'm not suggesting that this isn't and that you don't do it, but it seems to me that to the extent that this could be made conscious, it would be a service to the society and to the individual citizens who make it up. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this is a discussion of journalism in Central Asia and the Caucasus, or in CAMCA region. But it isn't. It's a discussion of journalism in a lot of very distinct countries and in different capitals and very different environments. But it seems to me that this is unfortunate because this really repeats and echoes the Soviet situation in which you divide up these people into separate republics that didn't exist before the revolution and keep them separate and divide and conquer. And so the second mission, it would seem to me, and I don't mean this to be something that's, in big bold letters above the door of your office, but that one needs to be conscious of and and attend to deliberately is the sense of a region. Now, you know, hats off to you guys at Times of Central Asia and to your unpaid AI assistants who are doing the translating. Hats off to you that you're issuing it in 5 languages, and it's up at the top of your letterhead, I noticed, which is impressive, and whoever's editing the AI version is doing a pretty good job, in my impression. But it seems to me it would be useful. I wish you all real success, and also hope that you have real competitors, and that the competition is on explaining to citizens of the region the life of the region. And I think that's utterly neglected. I mean, even in an area like, it's only in areas like sports where this will occasionally pop up. But it's not an area, I mean, for example, I know that there have been high-level meetings of medical people across the region, and they've identified some really astonishing problems and action possibilities, unreported. I think if you start casting about for stories that elucidate the reality is of regional life. I'm not saying slanted in favor of Slianya Narodov or some crazy thing like that, but just covering it so that I, as a citizen in Tajikistan, can read your outlets and understand better something that actually is occurring, let's say, in Kazakhstan, but I never understood the relationship, because there you have to go to 5 different papers to do it. You see my point. Citizenship and regionalism seems to me, should be the 2 guiding principles which inform. I'm not suggesting that this isn't a critique of what you're doing now. It's just building a second story on the structure that you already have.
I just want to answer the second question, because it's very interesting. When we were setting up OC Media, of course it's in English, and we were thinking how to reach the local audiences. So in the beginning, we were publishing in 2 languages. It was English and Russian. But what we didn't realize is it was very hard for us to reach people who their main language was Russian and their consumption was quite different. So we struggled with that, and we could not reach the audiences. So what we did, we shut down the Russian service, and we set up partnerships with 6 media outlets in the Caucasus region. These 6 media outlets started republishing us in 4 Caucasus languages: Georgian, Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Russian. And these partnerships are not symbolic, they are very active. So to give you the idea, they republish about 40 articles a month. I mean, we don't do breaking news, so we have this like long reads. And it gave huge access to the local audiences in different countries. And in the beginning, everybody was skeptical that, Georgians are not interested that much what is going on in Armenia, in Azerbaijan. But it turned out our colleagues from these media outlets were telling us that very often stories that they republish from us about other countries, like for example Georgians from Azerbaijan and so are one of the top read stories that they have on their website in their languages. So it was very successful experiment, and we are very proud of it, and we're trying to give this example to other media, other regional media outlets who actually have, this is our strength, that we have access to very difficult geographical places. And we have this, for example, Armenian outlet cannot have journalists on the ground in Azerbaijan, right? So very often Armenian outlet republishes content we have from Azerbaijan, and the other way around. And we have journalists in Abkhazia, which is a luxury which a lot of Georgia-controlled territory media outlets don't have, and they republish it a lot. So there is definitely huge interest in what is going on in the region, and it's not like people are just watching what is going on in their own countries. So this is our response to your question.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, but
you made a statement that Armenian journalists cannot be in Azerbaijan.
They cannot.
Yeah, is it a real story or is it just your perception?
No, they cannot.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Star, I'm actually really optimistic about regional coverage, done by media, but I think it's going to be carried out by the new media landscape, because existing and I think waning kind of media landscape that we used to have, corporate media, traditional media, or legacy media as we call it, these days, has always been set by existing advertising market that supported, like heavily supported, the construction of having news media outlets report only on their countries, and then receiving money from local advertisers and other businesses or whatever their model could be. I just want to give you like a sort of adjacent example to media landscape is Kyrgyz movies that are being filmed. They may be filmed in Kyrgyzstan or in numerous Central Asian countries, are now doing extremely well throughout the region. So because films are made now not in Russian but in Kyrgyz, doing the lip sync in Kazakh is so easy, because the languages are almost identical, and so they just hire a voice actor, change several letters, not even translating, right? And so there you have it. You can just kind of dub your movie and then have it on Kazakh screens. The same thing is happening in Uzbekistan. Films are being translated into Uzbek language, and one of the most I think inspiring stories for me was the film Beish, which means heaven. And so it was screened in Azerbaijan. So this is an unprecedented thing for Kyrgyzstan and Kyrgyz movie makers. But the bigger picture here, I think, is that this is only possible when there is a inter-regional connectivity. When the governments agree that they are kind of welcoming each other's efforts for unity, then the political layer goes, and economic layer goes, and business layer goes, and somehow media, culture, commercials, films, everything kind of piles up. And so what I've been seeing a lot is that Kyrgyz bloggers are friends with Uzbek bloggers. They're visiting each other in their respective countries and cities. Kazakh podcasters and Kyrgyz podcasters are visiting each other, doing this cross podcasting experiences. So the new landscape is so much more favorable, and also algorithms play to that. When you're in Astana and you are scrolling through your TikTok feed, you're going to see stories from, well, let's say Almaty, Shymkent, and Russia. But when you're in Almaty, you're also seeing stories from Bishkek. So because it's regionally it's closer. So in that sense, I think throughout these 2 days we talked about a lot how partly due to war in Ukraine, there's been a lot of efforts for the region to unite. And that is really translating into new media and new media practices. And I think I've been to more Kazakh blogger birthdays last year than I have ever been in my life. So that's just I understand it's an anecdotal kind of example, but that's part of the trend. People are becoming more friendly to each other and getting to know more about their respective countries in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Azim. Actually, you brought a nice point, but when we conducted research, we realized there are stronger bonds between Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan in terms of interest, but we didn't see the same trend, for example, for Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, for example. Yeah, so in that sense, so we have to make a reservation. That's very important. And cinema is very important. So cinema is slowly but surely entering the space. So Kazakh movies are very popular now in Uzbekistan. Because culturally also they can easily relate to what they see, so it's much more understandable and actually better to comprehend. Dr. Star, you brought two issues that have to be local outlets or regional outlets have to be driven by. So citizenship and regionalism. So I think at this moment they are driven by censorship, and I should put in the brackets self-censorship. It's really high, and unilateralism. It's still the demand for this news quite local. Ask people in Uzbekistan what do they know about neighboring Afghanistan. Zero. You'll be surprised. It's not only in digital space, but if you go on public TV, it's still the same issue, as if Afghanistan is not nearby, as if Afghanistan is somewhere on a different planet. So very similar with other things. And then when we conducted research, we asked, because it should be demand-driven, these kind of outlets. What is your primary interest? What kind of regional news you interest to read? The first one came, any issues related to yellow press. So basically all the scandals, whatever related to cultural issues and things like that. So it came strongly as number one. Second, surprisingly, came the business issue. So they're interested in opportunities in neighboring countries. They're interested in latest developments in neighboring countries that they can seize an opportunity. So in that sense, we are lacking local Forbes, Bloomington, whatever. You can just come up with your own understanding. Some type of either regional business TV channel or some outlet that could streamline things. And we know we're usually, like in this region, highly centralized economies. But this type of grassroots initiatives may be a huge game changer. So that's something that came out strongly as a result of research. That's something I would call it as a low-hanging fruit that we should actually try to capitalize. Thank you.
Yeah, I was sharing earlier that I get most of my Central Asia business headlines out of DC, from all the business chambers I meet. And it's helpful because they put it in bite size and they email it to me. So I can see what the coverage around the major visit was from different agencies. And it's, and I think new media, especially film and his cultural content I think is very important. And I'm failing to wrap this up within 50 minutes as I promised, but I think there was quite engaging questions that comes from the audience. And going back to Dastan's question, Mongolia was one of the leaders in media freedom and self-expression, but we are, dropping in the past 2 years as well. There are more questions? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Emily. I'm a volunteer, and I have a question. We know how recommendations work, and all of us sit in a bubble where we see that information, what we want, and how we can stand against the propaganda when people choose the disinformation and propaganda.
Well, let me abuse the situation while the microphone is in my hands. Yeah, so the thing is, with all this disinformation and propaganda, we saw a quite distinct trend where more senior generation, they are driven by their sense that Russia is right, for example. And then they're looking for any type of confirmation bias, so basically to justify that position. And in that sense, you cannot, by arguing or something, just deliver that message. It takes some time, it takes some developments and things like that. But the most important thing is to actually teach how to do proper fact-checking. Not like sophisticated fact-checking, but take a look at different sources, because we are not able I really like what they did in Mongolia by basically giving space to all media outlets from different countries. And then you can choose, or you can listen to different sources and then juxtapose it and make a conclusion for yourself. So that's something that is missing. Because when you have strong Russia position and you don't have strong Ukrainian position there, then you cannot balance those things. So in that sense, it's important to do fact-checking. So I really like what Euronews is doing actually, by showing these small pieces step by step how they actually arrive to a conclusion. So they are not just sharing the conclusion itself. So it's important to teach the methodology, and once you actually reach some higher momentum when those methodology is internalized, you would be able to reach bigger numbers. So that's very important to consider while thinking about this information. But like I said, that's something that is well sold by different outlets when they try to create some any type of artificial news and then share across. They don't have to do anything. So everyone is actually already your agent because it's something outrageous and they're willing to propagate it further. Thank you.
And I think strong media literacy curriculum in your education system is very important.
I just wanted to add also that I think we sometimes forget that people have individual agency. So if you are scrolling through something and you find it problematic, what do you do next? Do you then individually go check another resource? And do you talk to your friends about that? I think we also forget the impact we have on the people around us. So, say like, hey, I saw this piece, this is, and then I went and looked it up, and that's not quite true. And so I think sometimes we overlook the individual and sort of community level aspects of dealing with disinformation because we trust our friends, right? We trust our family. And so even if your friend might be wrong about something, you're certainly much more comfortable talking to them about it, or you should be if they're your friend. But it's not that that's easy. I think we see this in the United States, a lot of disinformation and sort of people going into their own little bubbles. And I think that's true everywhere. But we forget that we do have individual agency over what it is we decide to click on, what we decide to do with our time, what we decide to do with our money, and that's important to remember.
I appreciate so much. It resonates so much with what I believe in. I think we talk about media literacy like a lot, and in our job we did hundreds, literally hundreds of videos to promote media literacy, how it's important to fact check and etc. However, in many cases you can find enough arguments to prove either of the sides, right? And so I think it's not only about, and the world is so polarized right now, you've got armies on both sides, or on three sides, or whatever number of sides you have, right? And so I think it's not only about media literacy, but it's also on a personal level. I think it's about our ability to kind of confront uncomfortable information. That when you see information that you don't agree with, to not get mad, to not vote it down, but to read it and try to get insight out of it, to understand what the other party is thinking. And it's so hard because, like you said, we're in bubbles, and algorithm greatly favors what we like, and it keeps pushing the content that we might possibly like, right? So on Netflix there are 2 thumbs ups now, not only 1 thumb up, but 2 thumbs ups. But on an institutional level, I think from the media industry perspective, I think, you talked about community. This is so important. Anyone who has worked with media crisis know. For instance, there is a media outlet who writes a false, publication about me. Said Azim kicked a cat, which I would never do, right? And it gets million views, right? And then when we go there and we find out and we prove that I never kicked a cat. And they wrote, it was a wrong publication. He never indeed kicked a cat. It's not going to get same million views, right? It's going to get 100 views. And so, when we try to kind of prove disinformation post factum, we always lose. But among very few things that I like what Elon Musk is doing about Twitter, very few things, the community notes are great. Because, there's a tweet that says Azim kicked a dog. And I don't have to, produce another piece to kind of disprove it. There's going to be a note. And that's why it's so important that first thing, that community, we as media consumers care about each other, and we, act as watchdogs for false information. But also, it's so great that you see, this additional piece of information, the community note immediately. So it shapes your perception. Exactly, it shapes the perception of information right away. And then, you have so little trust towards this, account, and you can mute it, right? So it's not reporting, a spam, reporting a false information. All that is necessary, but it's always acting post factum. So, having a community to kind of help it is a great thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're out of time, and to wrap it up, and I think, as Professor Starr said, that I think it's CAMCA networks and everybody's role to define who we are as a region, as a country, and as professionals, because otherwise other people will do it for us. We need to tell our own stories. We need to stick together to defend our public square, because we see that our public square is shrinking. Here and there, democracy is not taken for granted, right? We all need to stay together. So thank you all for sharing your unique stories, and I hope there will be regional outlets that really make sense, uphold citizen right, and at the same time promotes our region as a whole. because I think we're all in agreement that the region, CAMCA region, deserves more attention than it should. Attention and investment. Yeah. Thank you.